The scent of freshly cut cedar hung in the air, a perfume I'd always associated with creation, with making something new. My hands, rough and calloused, expertly guided the saw along the marked line on a heavy oak beam, this sunroom addition, to my parents' sprawling lake house in upstate New York, was supposed to be my masterpiece, or so I desperately hoped. I'm Ethan, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the son who chose sawdust over spreadsheets, a hammer over a Harvard MBA. My family, the Davenports, prided themselves on their pristine image. Dad, a retired investment banker, Mom, a prominent charity fundraiser, and my older sister Claire, a corporate lawyer already making waves. They'd introduce me with a tight smile. "This is Ethan. He builds things," their tone always making things sound like flimsy birdhouses. Instead of the custom homes and complex renovations, my company Artisan Builds was becoming known for. This sunroom, this project for them, was more than just wood and nails. It was my silent plea for a single nod of genuine approval, a chance to finally fit into their perfect picture. But even the straightest lines I cut seemed to curve under the weight of their expectations. Was this project, this offering of my best work, truly for them? Or was it a final, desperate attempt to build a bridge I wasn't sure they even wanted? I just wanted them to see me, not the version of me they wished I was. It had been Dad who called, his voice unusually devoid of its usual curt dismissal when discussing my work. "Ethan, your mother and I were thinking, this new wing needs a professional eye, someone with real structural know-how," he'd said. The words professional and know-how sounding foreign, yet intoxicating coming from him. Could this be it? The olive branch I'd been waiting for my entire adult life? Mom had chimed in on speakerphone, her voice dripping with uncharacteristic sweetness. "Oh yes, dear. Only you could truly bring our vision to life with that special Davenport touch." That phrase, Davenport touch, usually reserved for Claire's legal victories or Dad's golf trophies, now somehow included me. A fragile hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe they were finally seeing me, not just tolerating my existence. I agreed immediately, of course, even offering a substantial family discount, practically my cost for materials and my crew's basic wages. "It's the least I can do," I'd mumbled, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. The initial sight. Meetings were a bizarre dance of forced pleasantries. Dad would ask overly simplistic questions about load-bearing walls, nodding thoughtfully at my explanations, while Mom would gush about the charming rustic aesthetic I was proposing, even though I knew her taste leaned more towards sterile modernism. Every strained compliment felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon of past disappointments, but I clung to them like a lifeline. This had to be different. This time, they had to see. The initial glow of hope began to dim as the weeks wore on. The Davenport touch compliments became less frequent, replaced by an almost feverish impatience. Dad started hovering, not with interest, but with a critical eye, questioning timelines, material costs, things he'd never shown an aptitude for or frankly cared about before. "Are you sure this is the most cost-effective way, Ethan?" he'd ask, his gaze sharp, a stark contrast to his earlier feigned admiration. Mom, on the other hand, grew increasingly secretive. Her phone calls became hushed affairs, often taken in the pantry or out on the deck, her back turned. Once I overheard her whisper urgently, "No, he suspects nothing. The lawyers are handling the preliminary stages," before abruptly ending the call when she saw me approach. My blood ran cold for a second. Lawyers? Preliminary stages of what? She'd just smiled brightly, a little too brightly, and chirped, "Oh, just coordinating with the caterers for Claire's engagement party, darling. So much to do." But Claire's engagement wasn't for another 6 months. The pieces didn't fit like a badly cut dovetail joint. Even Claire, during her rare weekend visits, seemed distant, almost pitying. She'd offer vague, unsolicited advice like, "You know, Ethan, sometimes it's better to diversify your assets early on," her eyes darting towards Dad, as if seeking approval for lines she'd been fed. The air in the lake house grew thick with unspoken words, an undercurrent of something significant and unsettling just beneath the surface of polite conversation. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid, that their wealth and social standing naturally came with complex dealings I wouldn't understand. but a knot of unease tightened in my gut, a premonition that the bridge I was so desperately trying to build was, perhaps, leading to a cliff. My masterpiece was starting to feel more like a trap. The air had turned crisp, a sign that summer was surrendering to fall and I was behind schedule. On the sunroom's intricate cedar paneling, I needed a specific fine-toothed blade for the miter saw, one I knew Dad kept stashed in the old metal cabinet in their overstuffed garage. It was a place I usually avoided, a mausoleum of forgotten hobbies and their discarded ambitions for me. As I reached for the side door, its paint peeling slightly at the edges, I heard voices, Dad's booming baritone and Mum's sharper, more calculated tones. They were just inside, the door probably left ajar, their words carrying clearly. Through the thin wood, my hand froze on the doorknob, a sudden inexplicable dread washing over me. Honestly, Richard, once the Ethan issue is fully resolved and the property is solely in our name, its market value will skyrocket, Mom was saying, her voice dripping with a chilling pragmatism I'd never truly registered before. Ethan issue? What in God's name was the Ethan issue? My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden silence that followed her words. Then Dad's voice, heavy with disdain. He's been a drain for years. This so-called business of his, it's an embarrassment. The sooner we cut all financial ties and remove him from the estate planning, the better. His help with this sunroom is just a means to an end, Eleanor. Get what we can before the final papers are signed. Papers? Estate planning? Drain? Embarrassment? Each word was a nail hammered directly into my chest. The fine-toothed blade I came for was forgotten. A different kind of cutting was being planned, and I was the one on the chopping block. This wasn't just about disapproval anymore. This was a calculated, cold-blooded severance. The garage, once a place of dusty indifference, suddenly felt like the antechamber to my own execution. My breath hitched, caught somewhere between my throat and my lungs, as their voices continued, oblivious to their unwilling audience. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, assured me the codicil to the will is airtight, Mom continued, her tone disturbingly casual, like discussing a grocery list. Airtight for what? For ensuring their useless son gets absolutely nothing. And what? About that initial seed money we gave him for artisan builds, Dad pressed, the term seed money now dripping with sarcasm. That wasn't a gift? That wasn't them finally showing a flicker of faith? Mom's reply was swift and sharp. Henderson is looking into that too. He believes we can reclassify it as a formal loan, demand immediate repayment with accrued interest. The original promissory note draft we had him prepare years ago should be sufficient leverage. A promissory note? I vaguely recalled signing something when I was young and desperate, a document they'd brushed off as a mere formality. Just for our records, dear. It had felt like a lifeline then, a gesture of parental support. Now it was being sharpened into a weapon. Imagine, Dad chuckled, a dry, humorless sound, if he defaults, which he likely will given his business acumen. We could potentially acquire his workshop, his equipment for pennies on the dollar. Claire's husband has shown some interest in commercial real estate. This could be a tidy little acquisition for them. My own sister Claire, complicit in this. The workshop I'd poured my blood, sweat, and every last dime into, handed over to her husband as a tidy little acquisition. The betrayal was a physical force, a phantom hand clenching around my heart, squeezing the life out of me. Every kind word they'd ever spoken, every forced smile, every hollow compliment about my work on this very house, now replayed in my mind as a cruel, calculated charade. They weren't just disowning me, they were plotting to dismantle everything I had painstakingly built, to erase me not just from their future, but from my own present. The foundation of my entire life, the belief in some baseline of familial love, crumbled into dust right there, outside that garage door. This wasn't just about money or inheritance. It was about annihilation. My world wasn't just collapsing. It had already imploded, leaving a silent, screaming void where my family used to be. Somehow, through the roaring in my ears and the icy hollowness in my chest, I managed to move. My legs felt like lead, but I forced them forward, pushing open the garage door with a deliberate creak that I hoped masked the sound of my world shattering. They spun around, startled, faces paling slightly despite the dim garage light, guilt etched in the sudden stiffness of their postures. "Oh, Ethan, we were just discussing where to store these old golf clubs," Dad stammered, gesturing vaguely towards a dusty corner, his usual commanding tone replaced with a forced, unnatural joviality. Mum clutched the pearl necklace she always wore, a nervous habit I'd seen 1,000 times, but never had it seemed so sinister. "Yes, dear, just a bit of decluttering before the new sunroom furniture arrives," she added, her smile as brittle as spun glass. I nodded, my face a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. "Just needed the fine-toothed blade for the cedar," I said, my voice sounding eerily calm, distant, as if it belonged to someone else. My eyes scanned the shelves, deliberately avoiding theirs, landing on the red case of the saw blade. I picked it up. "Got it. Back to work then." Each word was a monumental effort, a betrayal of the inferno raging inside me. As I turned to leave, their relieved sighs were almost audible, a wave of unspoken self-congratulation that I hadn't suspected a thing. But they were wrong. I suspected everything. And in that moment, a new cold resolve began to crystallize amidst the wreckage of my heart. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing they'd broken me. Not yet. They had drawn their battle lines in secret. I would draw mine in silence. The drive back to my small downtown apartment was a blur, the city lights smearing into meaningless streaks of color. The moment I closed my own door behind me, the carefully constructed dam of composure I'd maintained all afternoon finally burst. I didn't shout, I didn't break things. Instead, a different kind of storm erupted. A silent, racking sob that tore through me, leaving me gasping on the hardwood floor of my living room. The sawdust still clinging to my work boots felt like a bitter mockery of my life's passion. All those years, every late night spent perfecting a design, every splinter dug from my skin, every ounce of pride I'd swallowed when they'd subtly belittled my craft. For what? To be deemed an issue, to be resolved, an embarrassment, to be cut off. The family discount I'd offered them felt like I'd paid them to hammer nails into my own coffin. This wasn't just the pain of betrayal. It was the agonizing death of a lifelong illusion, the illusion that one day I would be enough for them. Tears streamed down my face, hot and cleansing, not tears of self-pity, but tears of mourning for the son I used to be, the one who had so desperately chased a ghost of their approval. But as the first hint of dawn grayed the windows, something shifted within that profound emptiness. The sobs subsided, replaced by a chilling clarity. That naive Ethan, the hopeful son, he was gone, and in his place a stranger was starting to stir, someone forged in the fires of their deceit. This wasn't an ending. It was a brutal, unwanted beginning. The grey light of morning found me still on the floor, the initial storm of grief having passed, leaving behind an unnerving calm. My first coherent thought wasn't about revenge, but survival. How do you fight ghosts who wear the faces of your parents? I reached for my phone, my fingers surprisingly steady, and dialed Sarah. Sarah wasn't just my college buddy. She was a sharp-witted paralegal, the most pragmatic person I knew. Her gasp on the other end of the line when I recounted the garage. Conversation was real, unfeigned, a stark contrast to the Davenport's chilling composure. "They said what? Ethan, are you okay? Where are you?" Her genuine concern was a balm to my raw nerves. "You can't let them do this," she stated, her voice firming after the initial shock. "This isn't just family drama, Ethan. This is predatory." Her words predatory hit a nerve. It was exactly what it felt like, being hunted by my own blood. She insisted on coming over immediately. Armed with coffee and a legal pad, Sarah listened again, patiently, as I pieced together the fragments of their plan, the casual cruelty, the calculated financial destruction. "That promissory note for artisan builds," she mused. "You said it was informal. Did you keep a copy?" I vaguely remembered a flimsy piece of paper, signed in a haze of youthful optimism and desperation for capital, stuffed into an old accordion, file years ago. We spent the next few hours in an old shoebox overflowing with forgotten invoices and dusty blueprints. It felt like searching for a single specific nail in a mountain of sawdust. Then, tucked inside a faded folder labeled Initial Business Setup, Miscellaneous, We found it. Not just the note, but something even better. It was an internal email thread I'd been accidentally CC'd on years ago between Dad and their then financial advisor. Dad's words, typed out in cold, hard black and white, were damning. Ensure the repayment terms are structured to give us maximum leverage if Ethan's venture doesn't meet our expectations. Consider it a leash, not a lifeline. A leash, not a lifeline. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath all over again. This wasn't just a memory, this was irrefutable proof of their long-standing manipulative intent. Sarah let out a low whistle. "Ethan," she said, her eyes wide. "This isn't just a smoking gun. This is the whole damn arsenal." The first ray of light, sharp and fierce, had just pierced through the darkness. Sarah, true to her pragmatic nature, didn't waste time on sympathies beyond that first crucial hour. "Okay, Ethan," she declared, tapping the damning email printout. "This leash just became the rope they're going to hang themselves with. But we need more than just defense. We need an offense so solid it'll make their teeth rattle." Her ferocity was contagious, a stark contrast to the Davenport's insidious plotting. We moved from my cluttered living room to her small, efficient home office. She introduced me via video call to a contact of hers, a bulldog of a litigator named Marcus Thorne, who specialized in contractual disputes and, as Sarah put it, making arrogant people pay through the nose. Thorne listened to my story, his expression unreadable. Then a slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "Mr. Davenport," he finally said, his voice a low growl, "your parents haven't just been unkind. They've been monumentally stupid. And stupidity in legal matters often comes with a hefty price tag." His words, brutal and direct, were a strange sort of comfort. He saw their actions not as a family squabble, but as a calculated attack with clear legal vulnerabilities. The Ethan issue, as Mom had called it, was about to become their Davenport disaster. Thorne's advice was precise. First, document everything. Every interaction, every past slight that hints at their pattern of undervaluation and control. Second, your professional expertise is now your sharpest weapon. That sunroom, it's no longer a peace offering. It's their Achilles heel. He explained the power of a mechanic's lien, a claim against their property for unpaid work and materials, something that could freeze their assets and halt any sale or refinancing of the lake house. And if they're trying to call in that bogus loan, Thorne continued, his eyes glinting, we don't just refute it. We countersue for damages for attempted fraud, for the emotional distress caused by this familial financial terrorism. Familial financial terrorism. The phrase was shocking, yet it resonated with a terrifying accuracy. Suddenly, I wasn't just a wounded son. I was a client with a case, a strong one. The useless builder they so despised was about to leverage the very foundation they stood on. The plan wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about dismantling their attack piece by piece, using their own arrogance and my hard-earned skills against them. The leash they'd fashioned for me, I was about to turn it into a noose for their ambitions. The game had changed, and I, the discarded pawn, was about to make my first move as a king. Returning to the lake house the following Monday felt like stepping onto a meticulously planned battlefield. Every beam I inspected, every wire I checked, was no longer just part of a job, but potential evidence. My parents, oblivious, continued, their charade occasionally dropping by with feigned interest, their questions about progress now laced with an almost palpable impatience. "Will it be done by October, Ethan? We have potential buyers. We'd like to show it to then," Mom mentioned. Casually one afternoon, her eyes not meeting mine. Buyers? This was new. Their desperation was making them sloppy. I worked with a quiet diligence, my phone subtly recording video during key inspections, my notes more detailed than ever. Then, while examining the new support structure for the sunroom's expansive glass roof, I found it. My ace in the hole. It wasn't an accident. I'd had a hunch based on Dad's penny-pinching insistence on a particular subcontractor he'd hired directly for the foundation work before I took over. The main support beam for the new wing, a critical load-bearing element, was undersized. dangerously so, and worse, there was evidence of concealed termite damage in the adjacent original framework that they had clearly instructed the previous crew to simply cosmeticize. "This isn't just cutting corners, Thorne," I'd reported later that night, sending him the video evidence. "This is willful negligence. If this roof collapses, it could kill someone." My useless son persona had one advantage. They never suspected I'd look this closely or understand the implications so thoroughly. Meanwhile, Sarah's digital sleuthing bore more bitter fruit. She uncovered a chain of deleted but recoverable texts between Mom and Claire. Claire's messages were sickeningly enthusiastic. "Just make sure Ethan gets nothing, Mom, that artisan." Builds should have been Peter's, Claire's husband, seed fund. He has real vision. So it wasn't just complicity, it was active, greedy participation from my own sister, coveting what little I had built. The betrayal now had multiple smiling faces. My family wasn't just dysfunctional. It was a viper's nest, and I was finally seeing all the fangs. The following Friday, as the Davenports were likely planning their weekend golf outings and charity, luncheons, Marcus Thorne unleashed our opening salvo. A meticulously prepared package, delivered by courier and requiring signatures, landed on their polished mahogany doorstep. It wasn't a polite letter. It was a declaration of war, cloaked in impenetrable legalese. The documents included, first, an immediate and formal stop work order for the sunroom project, citing severe structural concerns and non-compliance with Haimite. Building codes related to the compromised beam and termite damage I had documented. Issues I had verbally flagged to Dad earlier that week, only to be brushed off with an impatient, "Just get it done, Ethan. Don't be such a perfectionist." His dismissal was now Exhibit A. Second, a detailed invoice for all materials purchased, labor hours accrued by my team and myself for the sunroom project to date, demanding payment within 10 business days. This wasn't the family discount version. This was Artisan Build's full, unapologetic rate. The time for charity was over. Third, and perhaps the most satisfying, was Thorne's formal refutation of their ludicrous loan reclamation attempt. It laid out with surgical precision the evidence of their original intent. Dad's leash, not a lifeline email taking center stage, and flatly stated any attempt to enforce such a predatory, undocumented claim would be met with a vigorous counterclaim for attempted fraud and harassment. We weren't just defending, we were daring them to escalate. The initial response, as Thorne predicted, wasn't panic. It was pure, unadulterated Davenport arrogance. Dad left me a voicemail, his voice tight with fury, not fear. "Ethan, I don't know what kind of stunt you and some ambulance-chasing lawyer are trying to pull, but you will cease this nonsense immediately. This is a family matter, and you are way out of your depth. Call me when you've come to your senses." Mum sent a flurry of texts, oscillating between wounded motherly pleas. "How could you do this to us, your loving parents?" and thinly veiled threats about family reputation. Claire, true to form, chimed in with a sanctimonious email to them, lecturing me on filial duty and the disgrace I was bringing upon their good name. They still thought I was the same useless son, easily intimidated, easily broken. They hadn't realized the boy they'd tried to discard had picked up a sword. But as the weekend passed and the stop work order remained firmly in place, a new, unfamiliar tremor began to ripple through their confident facade. The first crack in their ivory tower had appeared. The unfamiliar tremor quickly escalated into a full-blown earthquake by Monday afternoon. The news that Artisan Builds had officially halted work, citing unresolved structural and safety violations, spread like wildfire through the small, gossipy community of luxury contractors and suppliers Dad prided himself on knowing. Suddenly, their quick flip before the fall selling season looked less like a savvy investment and more like a festering wound. My phone, which had been ominously silent from their end after Dad's initial bluster, erupted into a relentless siege. It wasn't just vibrating, it felt like it was having a seizure in my pocket, a physical manifestation of their spiraling panic. First came Dad's roared voicemails, each more apoplectic than the last. "Ethan, pick up this damn phone. You are sabotaging this family. I'll have your license revoked. I'll ruin you." The threats felt hollow now, the desperate thrashing of a cornered animal. Then Mom's texts, a cascade of emotional blackmail. "Your father's heart can't take this stress. Are you trying to kill him? You're tearing this family apart. Ethan, please, just call us. We can fix this, whatever this is." The feigned ignorance was insulting. Then Claire, abandoning all pretense of sophistication, her messages a jumble of typos and fury. "You have no idea what are doing. The bank is calling about the bridging loan for the new property. This is a disaster. Mom is a wreck. You need to stop. This now." My stop work order, citing legitimate safety concerns, was apparently less of a disaster than their precarious financial overreach. The irony was almost too rich. The messages piled up, over 50 in a few hours, a frantic symphony of threats, accusations, then wheedling, and finally, the first cracks of desperation. "Ethan, please," one of Mom's later texts read, the anger replaced by a quavering plea. "Just tell us what you want. We can talk about the loan, we can talk about anything, just make this stop." There it was, the first hint of a beg. I didn't respond to a single one. I simply forwarded screenshots of the more egregious threats and manipulative pleas. To Marcus Thorne with a one-line email, "FYI, they seem concerned." My silence, once a symbol of my subjugation, was now my most potent weapon. Their carefully curated world was crumbling, and the useless son they'd plotted to erase was holding the detonator, his finger calmly on the button. The begging had begun. The Davenports, for the first time in their gilded lives, found themselves backed into a corner they couldn't charm, bully, or buy their way out of. The stop work order was a public scarlet letter on their precious lake house, making any potential sale impossible and raising awkward questions amongst their elite circle. Their carefully constructed facade of effortless affluence was cracking under the strain, and the whispers were starting. The looming threat of a formal investigation by the county building inspector, prompted by Thorne's anonymous tip regarding the structural issues, was a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. They had wanted to flip the house for a quick, substantial profit. Now they were facing potential fines, costly mandatory repairs under official scrutiny, and a property rapidly becoming unsellable. Their own lawyer, a man more accustomed to drawing up favorable prenups than dealing with actual construction litigation, was clearly outmatched by Thorne's aggressive evidence-backed strategy. Marcus Thorne, on my behalf, laid out our terms with the icy precision of a surgeon. First, an immediate, irrevocable withdrawal of any and all claims related to the fabricated business loan. No negotiation, no discussion. It simply vanished from the table as if it never existed, the damning email chain serving as its silent epitaph. Second, full and immediate payment of the outstanding invoice for Artisan Build's work, including penalties for late payment as stipulated in the now very convenient standard contract I had them sign at the project's outset, a detail they'd likely overlooked in their arrogance. Suddenly, my useless paperwork was proving quite useful. Third, and non-negotiable, they were to hire a neutral, Thorne-approved engineering firm to assess and rectify all structural and safety defects at the lake house at their sole and considerable expense before any further work by any party could commence. Their grand sunroom was now a monument to their own deceit, and they were going to pay dearly to make it safe, not for profit, but for basic compliance. Their attempts to haggle, to offer a more reasonable settlement, were met with Thorne's unwavering, almost bored refusal. Each concession they were forced to make felt like a small piece of justice being chipped away from me. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been utterly inverted. They were no longer the puppet masters, they were a tangled mess of their own strings, desperately trying to avoid a complete unraveling. With all avenues of intimidation and legal maneuvering exhausted, the Davenports resorted to their final, most desperate tactic, emotional manipulation. It was Mom who called, her voice once sharp with condescension, now broken and pleading, a grotesque caricature of maternal distress. "Ethan, my darling boy," she began, the endearment feeling like acid on my skin. "Can't we just put all this ugliness behind us, for the sake of the family?" "What family, Mum?" I asked, my own voice calm, almost detached, a voice she clearly didn't recognize as mine. the one that plotted to financially cripple me and disown me while I was breaking. My back on your vanity project? Her breath hitched. We were wrong, Ethan. Your father, he gets ideas. He was stressed. We never meant for it to go this far. Please, son, can't you find it in your heart to forgive your foolish old parents? Foolish? They were calculated, cold-blooded. The attempt to infantilize their malice was pathetic. Forgiveness is one thing, Mom, I stated, each word measured. Forgetting the calculated attempt to destroy everything I've built, to label me a drain and an embarrassment, that's another. The Ethan issue, as you called it, has been resolved by Mr. Thorne. There's nothing left to discuss personally. Then Claire tried, a tearful, rambling voicemail. Ethan, you're tearing us all apart. Think of Mom and Dad's health, Peter and I. We were counting on that lake house sale for our down payment on the new clinic. You're ruining everything for everyone. Claire, I replied via a single, concise text message, forwarded through Thorne to her and my parents. Your concern is noted. Perhaps Peter can secure a loan for his real vision, the same way I was expected to for artisan builds, with a leash attached, drafted by family. The silence that followed was profound. My final communication was simple. I would fulfill my contractual obligation to oversee the correct and safe completion of the sunroom. Once the independent engineers certified that all initial repairs were up to code and my invoices were paid in full. Beyond that, artisan builds would no longer be available for any Davenport-related projects. There were no more pleas, no more threats, just the deafening sound of consequences. I wasn't their useless son anymore. I wasn't even their son, not in any way that mattered. I was Ethan, owner of Artisan Builds, a man who knew his worth, a man who was finally blessedly free. The phoenix had not only risen, it had taken flight, leaving the ashes of a toxic past far behind. The lake house sunroom was eventually completed, under the strict supervision of the independent engineers, its flawless cedar paneling a silent testament to the storm it had weathered. I received my full payment, every last cent, not a word of thanks, just a cold, impersonal bank transfer. But the money, I realized, was the least significant part of my victory. What I had truly gained was immeasurable, my freedom, my self-respect, and a profound, unshakable understanding of my own worth. Artisan Builds flourished in the aftermath, my reputation for integrity and quality work, somehow amplified by the quiet dignity with which I'd handled the Davenport situation. I no longer looked for their faces in the crowd at industry awards, no longer felt that familiar ache of inadequacy when their names were mentioned. The leash they thought they had on me had been an illusion I'd helped maintain. By severing it, I hadn't just cut them off, I'd liberated myself. Did it hurt? Yes. A part of me would always mourn the family I wished I'd had. But that grief was now a clean ache, a scar that told a story of survival, not a festering wound of ongoing torment. The most valuable lesson: sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones you need to love yourself enough to walk away from. It's not about burning bridges in anger, but about stopping rebuilding the ones that only ever led you to a place of pain. If you're out there feeling like the useless one, feeling trapped by expectations that diminish you, know this: your value is inherent, not granted by others. Find your truth, build your own foundation, and don't ever be afraid to demand what you're worth, even if it means standing alone for a while. Because the strongest structures are often built by hands that once trembled, and the brightest dawns often follow the darkest nights. You are the artisan of your own life. Build. Well.